Hello, welcome back to Automatic Sports. And of course, in the recent news with the Sixers, of course, Daryl Morey being fired, I thought I would go over and look at all of his transactions during his tenure, pick out some that are important in terms of how he got here, and then sort of go over what happened, what exactly happened, how I felt personally in the moment, and then how I feel now. I'm specifically saying how I felt just because I know people, of course, are always going to have different views, and I didn't know enough people to send out a survey to that were specifically Sixers fans. So with that being said, we're going to get started with the 2020-2021 season. So some context before we get into it. Before this season, you already had the Sixers Tobias Harris contract, trading for Seth Curry, moving off of Jimmy Butler, and this is right after we lost to the Atlanta Hawks. So keep that in mind as we. No, this is sorry. This is after. Is this during the? Is this during the bubble? Is this after the bubble? I think this is after the bubble. So this is basically this is the year. No, yeah. This is after the bubble. Okay, yeah. So already signed Ben Simmons to an extension. Lost Jimmy Butler. Have Tobias Harris. Just want to put that out there, just so that way you know what Daryl Morey was working with, because that is one thing I would say, despite his weaknesses, Daryl Morey was pretty good at, which was he's good at digging out of situations and getting some good value. It's a question of whether or not he puts himself there, which I think in the early days he was working off of other issues that the team had put themselves into. But then basically James Harden trade and onward were things that he brought onto himself. So of course, like I said, starting with the 2020-2021 season, the big transaction here, of course, is trading Al Horford, Theo Maledon, and one more name that I just am not going to be able to pronounce, for 2026 first round pick to Oklahoma City for Terrence Ferguson, Danny Green, and Vincent Poirier. Now, this was originally with the 2025 first round pick that was protected, and that turned into VJ Edgecombe. So glad that didn't they didn't go to OKC, because we would have been in a lot of trouble if that went to OKC. But obviously the big part of this is we received Danny Green, who was a very good role player for us, and got that first round pick back. Losing Al Horford, and now OKC has a 2026 first round pick, which I imagine is going to be relatively late. Let me just look that up right now, since it should be the said draft order since the lottery happened, right? Why does NBA.com make this harder than it needs to be? Okay. So, okay. Oh my god, they have the 12th. Jeez, that's awful. Okay. So they have the 17th pick. So, not the best, not the worst. Of course, how I felt then was I was happy Al Horford was gone. Despite being so useful to the Celtics, he had not really done as well for us, which was quite frustrating. And I liked Danny Green. I remember, of course, this is right after the bubble year where, he had his ups and downs, but genuinely good shooter, good defender, and that's always something we can use on the Sixers, especially around Joel Embiid. And of course, my current feelings more than anything are, thank God OKC did not take VJ from us. If that pick had converted to OKC, oh man, this would have been a very, very bad season. Another sort of interesting pick I want to bring up is drafting Charles Bassey in the second round. And I want to bring that up because I looked at his basketball reference page earlier today, which, by the way, if you want to look at these transactions, I'll have the basketball reference pages in the description, along with a link to my Excel spreadsheet, so that way you can look at how I felt about every transaction in the 2020 decade so far. But Charles Bassey, looking at his basketball reference page, is actually could have been very valuable to the Sixers today, because I do feel one thing that the Sixers never have enough of is size and rebounding. And so looking and seeing that Charles Bassey, who is 6'10", so not the tallest guy, but on Golden State this year averaged 7.2. Oh my God, he was on 4 teams. Wow. So yeah, he averaged. Let me do the. Oh, there he is. So he averaged 4.4 rebounds. On 2 different teams, he averaged 7 rebounds. The 2 teams that he actually played more games for. No, he didn't do well for Boston. But still, he can average a good amount of rebounds. Can average, he doesn't need to have much offense, but he don't need much offense. Can block a shot here or there. Shockingly shot 84.6% from the free throw line. The whole season he shot 70 in 13 games, so take that with a grain of salt. And also had a defensive box plus minus on the season. It says 0.5, which doesn't make much sense because you have a negative 1.4 for Memphis, a 4.2 for the Sixers, a 3.3 for Boston, and then a 0.4 for Golden State. Even if you want to say, well, it was because he played more games in one place than another, he played the same amount of games at Boston where the 3.3 was and the 0.4. So that would be what, 1.75, 1.8, something like that. So that would still be good. And even then, with the Sixers earlier in his career, he had a defensive box plus minus of 2.1, 1.3 for the Spurs, 3.1 for the Spurs. So it's clear that he can be a good defender, even if he doesn't impact too much on the offensive end. And for a backup center, that's honestly more important for the Sixers. So it would have been nice to keep him. And so I sort of bring him up just because, along with some few other people we will see, it would have been nice to keep them. Obviously, through the video, you're going to see it's basically scrolling down through the whole spreadsheet. So if you want to pause and take a second to look at anything, feel free to. So, of course, 2021-2022, you signed Andre Drummond and signed Danny Green to a multi-year contract, which is important. Drummond, good rebounder, and was pretty good at holding the fort sometimes while Embiid was injured. Current day, thought he was a little on the older side, but still did everything we wanted him to pretty well. Danny Green to the multi-year contract, again, I thought was deserved. He had played well for us, and today, pretty neutral. Sort of wish we didn't maybe end his career early, since Embiid did fall into his knee, but it is what it is, and glad that he can now go on to be an analyst, because he always seemed like a really smart guy. One sort of key transaction, I guess is the right word, transaction before we get to the big stuff, is waiving Haywood Highsmith, who I know overall stat-wise isn't that good, but he did have some good years with the Heat, where he's pretty valuable in terms of just playing that power forward role, being able to shoot a little bit, play some defense. And again, that's sort of a position the Sixers have always lacked. So, could have worked for us. Maybe he doesn't develop the same way. You never know. So, of course, now we get to the big stuff. Trading Seth Curry, Andre Drummond, and Ben Simmons. Drummond and Ben Simmons in a 2023 first-round pick, which became Bryce Sessenbaugh, and a 2027 first-round pick to the Brooklyn Nets for James Harden and Paul Millsap. I don't even really talk about Paul Millsap because he really wasn't good for us at all. The Sixers also got a trade exemption. Yeah, you got a trade exemption. So, first thought was, wish we could have kept Seth and Drummond. Seth had been a good shooter for us, and had some great games. And Drummond being a backup center was really nice. Just again, he sort of was the opposite of Embiid in terms of wasn't as good offensively, wasn't always as good defensively either, but he rebounded so well, and that's always been a struggle for the Sixers. But James Harden for Ben Simmons, in hindsight, was really, really good. I mean, even though we only got Harden, we didn't really get any picks back or anything. Considering that Ben Simmons has basically become a non-factor in the NBA, and you got James Harden, who is still being very good for the Cavs now. Great trade, and honestly, probably one of, if not the best move that Morey had made for the Sixers. Signed Andre Drummond shortly after. I hoped he wasn't too old. He was too old. And then to end the season, trade Danny Green and David Roddy to the Memphis Grizzlies for DeAnthony Melton. Again, Danny Green, this was post-injury, if I remember. And so getting DeAnthony Melton was pretty good value. Honestly, my recollection of Melton was feeling that he was too limited, that he didn't shoot well enough. His defense was good, and wasn't a good enough ball handler. Looking at his basketball reference page, he definitely was a good enough shooter. Ball handling could have still been questionable, and he was a good defender. So maybe it was a little harsh on him at the time, but either way, for a guy who's getting someone of D'Anthony Melton's value at the time for an injured old player and someone who, before researching, I had never heard of before, felt it was a good move. Going 2022-2023 season, of course, the most notable ones is most notable sort of contractual signings is PJ Tucker and Daniel House, both of whom weren't super impactful, had some fun games, but nothing crazy. And then, of course, waiving Isaiah Joe. At the time, it felt like, I think this guy could shoot, but it's just not working. And then, of course, he goes to OKC the next year, starts shooting really well. So, yeah, that was frustrating. And now, he's very helpful for the Oklahoma City Thunder, so even worse. Also waived Charles Bassey. Again, at the time, I was like, is he not better than DeAndre Drummond? And it seemed like he was better than DeAndre Drummond. I think he was better than DeAndre Drummond, so that was a little annoying. Big trade this season. Philly was part of a 4-team trade with Charlotte Blazers. Who else? 4-team trade. Portland Trail Blazers, Philadelphia 76ers, Charlotte Hornets, and Cam Spencer, blah, blah, blah. Am I blind? Am I not reading this correctly? I must not be reading this correctly. Either way, so the Sixers traded Matisse Thybulle and a second-round pick. Matisse Thybulle to Portland, second-round pick to Charlotte. We got back Jalen McDaniels and a 2024 second-round pick. At the time, I was really disappointed at losing Matisse. Even though offensively he wasn't doing great, his defense was so interesting just because of how, unlike other perimeter defenders, he specifically would defend from behind really well, which you don't normally see. Anyone who played basketball can remember trying to block someone from behind and almost always getting called for a foul. For some reason, he could get around it. The only caveat was if it was a really fast athletic guard, like Ja cooked him one night because Ja would be too fast. But against, Matisse in those times would have been perfect against Jalen Brunson because Jalen Brunson isn't fast. He's very tactical. And so Matisse being lanky, having great timing would have been really helpful. I thought Jalen McDaniels at the time, something you learn about me is that my biggest weakness is that I'm very optimistic. I try to be very optimistic because I try to watch sports in a good mood. one, I generally just like being happier, but two, it might be a little bit just trying to go against the fold of East Coast fandom where it's very, very negative. So I thought Jalen McDaniels maybe could do the same thing. He really couldn't, and man, it would have been so nice if he could have kept Matisse. And of course, probably one of the worst moves of Morey's tenure, signing Mac McClung to a two-way contract so that way he could be in the dunk contest, and waiving Julian Champagnie. Now, again, we have no idea how he would have come out in terms of development. Sixers' development on the inside has been very hit or miss, where you get Tyrese Maxey, where he comes in and the next year he blows up, and then you also have other guys like we mentioned with Isaiah Joe, again Champagnie, Bassey, who come in and should do well but don't. So maybe it wouldn't have worked out for us, but still, when you see another really, really good role player on a championship team in the Western Conference, it gets a little frustrating. 2023-2024, which I cannot remember if this is the first year with Nick Nurse or if we're still in 23-24. So this is the first year with Nick Nurse instead of Doc Rivers. Signed Mo Bamba. I noted this one because I played against him in high school, and I was like, hey, maybe hopefully he'll do well. He did okay. It was fine. Signed Patrick Beverley, which I remember purely because I didn't like his play style. I respected him in terms of wanting to compete, but don't like guys that dive into knees, as someone who has hurt his knee pretty bad. And then Kelly Oubre, who at the time I thought was going to be just a sort of like Jalen McDaniels, except that he shoots more shots. Honestly, been one of my favorite players over the last 3 years. Really good energy, whether it's off the bench or as a starter. Has really improved as a defender, at least in terms of caring, whether or not it really translates. But he has some fun offensive games where he's hot, and it feels like everything goes in. And so really have liked Kelly Oubre. This year, so 3-team trade where we traded James Harden, Petrusev, and PJ Tucker to the Clippers. And the Clippers traded a first-round pick to OKC. And then the Clippers gave us Nick Batum, Robert Covington, KJ Martin, Marcus Morris, cash, a second-round pick, a 2028 first, a 2029 first, a 2029 second. And then OKC gave us a 2026 second. Okay. Overall, my thoughts on the trade was that I knew Nick Batum, decent defender, really good shooter. Liked KJ Martin as an athlete. Marcus Morris was sort of like Al Horford too, where it's like, hey, here's a guy on the Celtics who killed us. Maybe he could do better for us. He really didn't. And then Robert Covington, who I never really liked, even when he was originally on the Sixers. I always thought his defense was a little overrated. He would get steals, but it just felt like there were some possessions where he was just, for a good defender, he would just be too lost. But at the same time, he had improved, so maybe he could do well for us. In the end, it was exactly as I thought. I liked Batum and Martin. Both of them had great games for us, did really well for us. And we have to wait on the picks, as 2028, 2029 stuff in there. And of course the 2027, because they have the 2026. I don't know, the Clippers, they don't have any picks. We traded Daniel House and cash and a second round pick, which became Cam Spencer, to the Pistons for a 2028 second round pick. Don't like that, just because gave up a pick for a later one, I guess. And would have liked to keep Cam Spencer. He's been pretty good in Memphis. Again, another shooter. And with a team built around a center, could have been great to have another shooter. Then another traded Marcus Morris, cash, and a second round pick to San Antonio Spurs, and then we traded Furkan Korkmaz in a second round pick, and 2020 and a 2029 second round pick. The first one was 2024. To the Indiana Pacers for Buddy Hield, and Spurs got Doug McDermott. At first I was like, oh, Buddy Hield is a great shooter. You know, he's someone who, even in the outskirts of Sacramento, you knew about him, right? So I thought, hey, great with spacing. Hopefully can do well for us, especially with Joel Embiid gravity. He did not do well for us at all, and really saw the limitations of specialists, and really had me think more about how much basketball has changed. Because in past years, he would have been great because of the way specialists were treated. But now, not really being able to create isn't good enough. So, hasn't been too great for us. Traded Patrick Beverley for campaign. Cool. Traded Jaden Springer for a 2024 second round pick, which became Adem Bona. At the time, I was like, ugh, don't like trading with the Celtics. And at the time, it felt like watch him become a superstar, because every time we've traded with the Celtics, especially with young guys, it has worked out exclusively for the Celtics. Instead, we got Dembona, who has been very helpful for us. Don't know how he would be for the Celtics. How old is Keita? Like, would they have drafted... Keita was drafted in 2022. Okay, so Keita was from Sacramento. So I guess the question is, would they have gotten Keita with Bona there? He is taller, which helps. But in terms of role, are kind of similar. Keita's definitely better. Yeah, that's an interesting conversation. That's something I should bring up. I'm family friends with a lot of Celtics fans. Would bring that up if the Celtics would have gotten Keita if they had had Bona, or if they could have had a chance at Bona. Maybe they wouldn't have drafted him anyway. And of course, we drafted Jared McCain, and at the time, I was like, I want McCain to do well, because all people talk about with him are his nails, and he does TikToks, and that was stupid. So I want him to do well. Of course, we all know how that happened, and we'll get to that trade. And for Bona, I thought physical backup center is probably going to be good. And my current feelings are it is pretty good, but he gets in too much foul trouble sometimes. Now we really get on to some of the bad in terms of Daryl Morey. So the first one being Paul George, multi-year contract. At the time, I was like, best free agent possible, probably just too much money. Now, Ingram is probably better. And now we have an untradeable contract. Again, I don't think he was available, like realistically available. So this was 2024-2025 season. So if I look up real quick, while I have you here, 2024 NBA free agents, right? Okay, OG Anunoby probably would have been better too. Right, so we got Paul George, Siakam, yeah, that would have been good. But they have like Emmanuel Quickley here. Like Emmanuel Quickley was on, he would have been restricted. Still could have probably got him, but he would have been restricted. Did I misremember this? I could have sworn that Brandon Ingram was a free agent, or could have been a free agent. Does it not count if he's restricted because he doesn't really hit free agency the same way? Forward. Let's go to 24. We have Gordon Hayward, Bertans. Where is... Do they have Paul George at a shooting guard? Just do wing. Okay, well, that doesn't exist. guard. You don't have him here either. Point guard, Markel Falls. Shooting guard. Not there. Small forward. We're not there. Power forward. Okay, for some reason it doesn't even have... Okay, what? Oh, available. Jeez, why did it go to available? Now it feels dumb. Okay. Okay, they count Paul George as a guard forward. All right, so I was wrong. Could have had OG or Pascal. I think OG, sort of similar to the James Harden trade, better now. At the time, didn't make as much sense. Pascal, he just doesn't shoot well enough. And that's really tough working with just having Ben Simmons, you know? Probably could have found a way, but that's just my hesitation. That'd be my guess on why they went for Paul George instead. So yeah, gonna have to change that. And then we signed Buddy Hield to a multi-year contract, which I didn't care for, but again, it worked later for trades. And speaking of trades, 6-team trade, which looks really scary, but is actually really simple for us. We traded Buddy Hield to Golden State, and in return got a 2031 second round pick from the Mavs. All I cared that was that Buddy Hield was gone, and that's it. This year we waived Paul Reed, which I was disappointed at because I thought he was a pretty good role player for us. And of course, it was the meme of B-Ball Paul and that he invented basketball, so that was also funny. But he's gone on and been valuable for the Pistons, especially with injuries going on for them. That's been good for him. Tyrese Maxey to multi-year contract, deserved. Kelly Oubre, multi-year contract, deserved. Drummond, a bit hesitant on this again. Thought he was getting older. Didn't know this would be that good. And this year, he really didn't have a good year. This year being the 2024-5 season. 2025-6, he did have a pretty good year, so I'll give him credit there. So it was good to have him. Sort of a signing that will go on the radar, or signing Gershon Yabusele. This was right after the Olympics where he did so well. And again, the thought process was shooting, strong power forward next to Embiid should be good. He never shot well enough. And unfortunately, he was just a little too short for what we need him to do. So I believe he's listed at 6'8". Let me just check that real quick before I slander this man's for his height. Oh, 6'7". Okay, that's even lower on Basketball Reference. And considering the fact that he was going to be going against Giannis, that's a little too short. And he just couldn't rebound as well as we needed him to. Next trade, one of Daryl Morey's best, trading Caleb Martin to Dallas for Quentin Grimes and a second-round pick, which became Johnny Broome, and we'll see how that goes in terms of the pick. Caleb Martin had, one, not played too well for us, and two, was injured, and we got Quentin Grimes, which was kind of insane in hindsight. Genuinely don't know how this happened. I mean, I know the Mavs at the time were making some interesting moves, but this is another one of those. It's like, wow, can't believe they just gave us that for free. We then traded Reggie Jackson and a 2026 first to the Wizards for Jared Butler and a bevy of second-round picks. It says that the 2026 first-round pick is the least favorable. I don't know exactly favorable of what. It didn't really say that in the link, unfortunately, or where I found the transactions. Even still, like a first for a bunch of fours, not the greatest. A first for a bunch of seconds, it's not that great. Traded KJ Martin in a second, 2 seconds actually, for cash. And this is sort of where you see, okay, maybe this plan wasn't really working out. Daryl Morey, what I've always said is his weakness, is he likes to be top heavy, where he gets his big stars and then he nickels and dimes his way to a roster. And with the Rockets, it sort of worked because James Harden wasn't hurt that often. Chris Paul didn't get hurt the first couple of years they did it. And same thing with everyone else. But then once Chris Paul got hurt, you sort of saw the cracks. With the Sixers, it's even worse because you're dealing with Joel Embiid, who's always hurt. And so being very top heavy with your cap when it's Joel Embiid sort of makes it tough to do anything else. So, yeah. Of course, drafted VJ and Johnny Broom. Have loved VJ. At the time, I can't remember his name off of the top of my head, but he's a power forward. I think he went to Utah. Let me just double check. So at first I wanted Ace Bailey because in my mind, again, we have never had a good power forward. And I thought it would be nice to have a good power forward. VJ has been everything we could ever want in terms of a rookie. So very happy with that, very happy with the pick. And I honestly, even though I wasn't happy at the time of the pick, as soon as I heard a story about living off of a generator for years, I was like, you know what? This guy's going to go out there. He's going to ball. He's going to find a way to make his money, and that'll at least be good for us for the first couple of years. Justin Edwards was converted from a two-way to a regular contract, which was nice. And then 2025, 2026, signed Barlow and then converted his two-way contract, which has been great. Like I said in my last video, I thought he was a rookie this year, and I was totally wrong, and he's been great. Quentin Grimes got signed again, deserved. Hopefully we'll get another contract if his market is still not great. Signed Charles Bassey to a 10-day. I didn't know we did this. And then we signed him to another 10-day contract, and I was like, we probably could have used him. And of course, the transaction everyone was waiting for. Trading Jared McCain to the Oklahoma City Thunder for a 2026 first-round pick, a 2027 second-round pick, a 2028 second-round pick, and another 2028 second-round pick. Hated this trade. Not totally true. I was kind of on the fence because at the time Jared McCain had started the season really, really bad, and then was sort of getting on a run. And so I sort of understood at the time that between him and Grimes, he had been playing worse than Grimes, so he got traded. What I then realized after talking to some people was how bad it was specifically for Tyrese Maxey, because Tyrese Maxey was leading the league in minutes and now had lost the next best playmaker on the team in terms of passing and assisting. And so it again should have showed like how shallow the Sixers were, because now you only had Maxey. And so that's when I really was like, this trade stinks. And of course, trading him to OKC, you knew, he's going to go to OKC. He's going to have all the spacing in the world. He's going to shoot really well, and we're all going to be upset. And here we are. To end on a high note, we got a trade exemption for Eric Gordon, so there's something. So overall, I would say the best moves that Daryl Morey made were, just scrolling back up so I can see them. I do think trading Ben Simmons is one of them, just because of where Ben's value was in terms of trade value, how low it was, and the fact that he had asked out. So getting a former MVP out of that is actually pretty good. Danny Green for DeAnthony Melton, also good considering that Danny Green was hurt. And lastly, I had mentioned earlier, but now I can't find it all of a sudden. Trading Caleb Martin for Quentin Grimes. Genuinely just a good trade. Like, we got a second round pick and a much better player. Of course, in terms of worst moves, I'd probably say, besides sort of the waiving of some guys and all that, the worst sort of actual trades that he made. Trey Matisse was bad. I wouldn't say it was the worst. Certainly Jared McCain. I'll say that one. Jared McCain. Signing Paul George to a multi-year contract was bad. And yeah, those are really the two. Now, a lot of people will probably say, shouldn't signing Joel Embiid also be on the list? In a vacuum, yes. The problem is, if you are a general manager for a team like the Sixers, and actually, the team like the Sixers is probably easier to have traded Embiid. But if you're a general manager and you have the first MVP on the team since 2000, you're probably going to give him an extension until he retires, just because it'll keep the ownership brass happy, because you're keeping the guy that, especially for the Sixers with the process, you're keeping sort of the best out of that whole miserable saga, right? The only teams that can really trade guys like that are teams that win habitually. Like the Celtics could do that, the Lakers could do that, but you look at the Warriors, and they had the same deal where it's like they could have traded Clay earlier. They could have traded Draymond earlier. They shouldn't have traded Poole. But the problem is when you have those guys who were successful and showed you success for the first time in a long time, you want to keep them. Whether or not the GM is heartless enough to do that, he has to somehow get that through to his bosses. And those guys might not want to. And so I feel like it's unfair to Morey to say, don't re-sign the first MVP in 20 years. Like, sure, but like, let's be honest, no one's doing that. It's the same way of people talking about, oh, just trade Embiid for a first. It's like, that's career suicide. It would have been the same thing there. Yeah, that's going to do it. Let me know down in the comments if there's a move that I missed or a move that you think was important that I didn't talk about. I did keep out some re-signings. Like, I didn't include... Did I include Maxey re-signing? I believe I did. Yeah, I include Maxey re-signing and stuff like that. I don't think I included all of them, just so that way I got to the important stuff. But just let me know. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.